Good evening. We live in a world filled with conflict. Democrats flee across state lines to avoid the conflict with Republicans. Yankees fans and Red Sox fans flee anywhere they can to avoid one another. The world is filled with conflict wherever we look. Religious, political, social, economic, cultural conflicts of all sorts. And we, in the ivory tower, seem helpless to resolve any of them. In 1946, at the University of Chicago, an attempt was made to solve one of the great conflicts of human civilization. Which is the more noble treat, the Latke or the Hamantash? They failed. Harvard failed. Yale failed. Stanford failed. Again and again and again. We might succeed tonight. So just a few words of introduction to the concept. Everyone knows what a Latke is. Everyone knows what a Hamantash is. But their apparent identities hide tremendous depths of meaning. For example, the names. Each has two names. Latke is a name derived through Russian and Polish and Slavic roots, and if you trace it back long enough, all the way back to Greek. It means a little oily thing, or perhaps a bit of olive oil. An appropriate name for something that reminds us of the miracle of the oil that was only supposed to burn for one night and burn for 8 days. But the Latke has another name. Latke is its Yiddish name, but in Hebrew, in Israel, it's called a leviva, which comes from the word lev, heart. So this little bit of oil actually has a beating heart inside. The Hamantash, again, has two names. Hamantash is a Yiddish name, and it means Haman's pockets. The pockets of the villain of the story of Esther. The pockets lined with ill-gotten gains, which, in the end, became the property of the victorious and much beleaguered Jewish people. But it too has another name. In Hebrew, they're called not Haman's pockets, but Oznei Haman, Haman's ears. Another anatomical reference. To what are the Hamantashen listening? Can they hear us? One final set of questions, and that is, what can we learn from these two delectable morsels? What do we learn from the humble Latke and the humble Hamantash? Well, the Hamantash teaches us the value of silence. You roll out the dough, cut it into circles, put some filling on it, pinch the corners so that you get a triangle. You put the triangle pastries on a baking tray, and you put them in the oven, and they sit there silently, making not a sound. Teaching us that sometimes the most powerful argument we can make is an argument from silence. The Latke, on the other hand, starting out as batter made with grated potatoes and onions and a bit of flour and some eggs, is plopped into a frying pan filled with oil, where it sizzles and bubbles and crackles, making as much noise as it can. But what do we learn from the Latke? We learn another lesson. The Latke is a humble treat. The Latke says, I need help in the world. I cannot conquer the world all by myself. I need condiments. Sour cream, applesauce, or, for those who are truly indulgent, both. It's not enough that I am the Latke. I cannot accomplish everything. I need assistance. What an important lesson for those of us who are just starting out in our quest to conquer the world. On the other hand, the Hamantash, who was so good at teaching us the lesson of silence, when it comes to humility, falls behind. He says, I think he's a he might be a she. She says, the Hamantash, she says, I am all you will ever need. I need no garnish, I need no condiment. You begin to see the tremendous depth of knowledge and understanding and meaning hidden in the humble Hamantash and the perhaps somewhat more humble Latke. But the night is young. We will hear expert debaters holding forth regarding the merits, first of the Latke, and then of the Hamantash. We invite your attention, your enthusiasm, your careful participation, and at the very end, your decision. Welcome and thank you.
For people who don't know, Zach Israel is joining Team Hamantash from Budapest, where he's attending the Central European University,
Hey everybody.
making this a truly international event.
I think at this point, I don't need to impress upon you the importance and seriousness of this debate. I think you understand. But I think maybe you're having trouble being indecisive. You may say to yourself, hoping to console yourself with the decision, you may try to avoid the decision and claim that this is a false dilemma. That you can have your Latke during dinner, and then later, at the end, for dessert, have a Hamantash. But you fail to you're neglecting the important competition that they are in. They compete nutritionally for the top of the USDA food pyramid. One is a fatty, oily food, and the other is a sweet, sugary food. For your health, you should not be having too much of both. You need to decide. They compete as Jewish holiday treats. They compete in our hearts or in our ears. So we have to make a decision, and we have to avoid getting bogged down in old debates as to whether sweet things are better than savory things. That debate has never been settled, but this one can be if we look to the science of economics. Economics allows us to treat things rationally and explore things as they are and guide us in our decision making. So in this case, the way that one would do that is by analyzing and by using a concept developed by David Ricardo centuries ago called comparative advantage. Comparative advantage asks which of the two things has the higher opportunity cost, and that thing is at a disadvantage. Now I'll try to explain that, and I'll use the very same example that Ricardo used, because economists are totally and utterly devoid of any imagination. So he asks us to make a few simplifying assumptions. Now, simplifying assumptions is merely economist speak for lies that we tell when we're lazy. So the first lie is that there are only two countries in the world, Portugal and England. This is very important for the model. So there's Portugal and England, and there are two goods in these countries: wool cloth and port. For those who don't know, port is a fortified wine, and wool is a scratchy fabric derived from the hair of sheep. Now, knowing what those things are makes it a little tricky to understand that those are the only two products, because you have to disregard the existence of lambs or regular wine or grapes. But please, follow me. So, essentially the idea comes down to some basic things that we all know about Portugal. It's good at making port, which kind of makes sense because it's from Portugal. And that England is good at making wool. And England is not very good at making wine, and Portugal is not very good at making wool. So, but what he found, and what the essential insight of Ricardo, is even if England suddenly became good at producing lots of wine, they shouldn't necessarily make it. They might want to trade it for Portugal anyways. And it's not just because wine from cold places tastes bad, and it does. Has anyone tried wine from New York State? Anyone? No? Count yourself lucky. So the reason might be, in fact it is the case, that even if, so let's flesh out the model and maybe we'll make it clearer. So, for example, and I'm making this up because as an economist it doesn't actually matter what the real world says. It takes 10 acres to make 1 yard of cloth in England, and it takes 2 acres to make 1 bottle of wine. Whereas in Portugal, it may take 3 acres to make 1 bottle of wine, and 20 acres to make a yard of cloth. Now, you may have heard me say earlier that England's worse at making wine. Well, that's the case. But what he found is that even if they were better, which is what I was just saying earlier, but I forgot about it, even if they were better and they could make the same bottle of wine with 2 acres, they shouldn't necessarily do it. But because by making that bottle of wine, they're giving up. Well, if they made 5 bottles of wine, they'd be giving up a whole yard of cloth. Whereas to make the same amount of wine, Portugal would only have to give up like 3/4 of a cloth. So that's significant when you're talking about cases and cases of wine, or less interestingly, yards and yards of fabric. So what that means is essentially that even if England can make more wine, they're giving up so much more of something else good that they shouldn't do it and they should still trade. Now this doesn't really apply terribly well to food, except in this. If we think of Latke as a country and Hamantash as a country, they have different opportunity costs. For instance, the opportunity cost of a Hamantash is the next best thing that you could be having. That's the case for any opportunity cost. So for me, the opportunity cost of this speech is my math exam that I could be studying for. So the opportunity cost for a Hamantash is the next best dessert. And the thing is, there are so many good desserts out there. There are so many good pastries. There are Danishes, which is like a Hamantash of the fruit variety, but bigger. There's scones, which have fruit inside them, but they're really good. There's pan dulce, and there's like all sorts of varieties throughout the Latin world. My favorite is Mexican pan dulce, which is like a donut. Oh, there are donuts, which are also fried in oil, which is even better because it's like a latke too, because it's fried in oil, but it's also a pastry. So really, there's a lot of different pastries that you're giving up to have a Hamantash, whereas a Hamantash is just pretty much a cookie with like maybe some stuff inside. It's kind of round. But really, it's latkes that don't have much competition when it comes to your opportunity cost for them. The opportunity cost is extremely low because all you're giving up is an order of French fries, which besides being bad for you, the only condiments that come with is ketchup, which is tomato paste and vinegar. Whereas the condiments for latkes are applesauce and sour cream, both much better. Besides, latkes are the only fried potato dish that I know of that encompasses flour and onions. Also very good ingredients. And so together, latkes are far superior than any other fried potato food, of which the only competition that I could think of is French fries, which are not very good. So as we see, the opportunity cost of latkes is very high, or is very low opportunity cost for latkes, and a very high opportunity cost for Hamantash. Which is why you should spend more of your nutritional top of the pyramid, the stuff that you really shouldn't be eating too much of. You should spend, when you're going to have a fried potato thing, it should be Hamantash. And when you're having a sweet sugary thing, oh, I'm sorry. I'm not really paying attention because I'm not very awake. When you need something fried and potatoey, you should be having a latke, which is the team I'm on. When you are not having, when you're having something sweet and sugary, you should not have a Hamantash like the other team suggests. You should have any of the other sweet sugary things that are out there. And so that's pretty much the main basis of my case. But if I haven't run out of time, have I? I would like to, I'd like to support this treat and any treat that's main purpose is to remind us of the importance of fuel efficiency. And to support that, and to support using your time and your energy wisely, and avoiding competitions to such important foods such as donuts, and pan dulce, and danishes. Thank you.
I'd like to thank Ian for his truly terrific speech. Because he mentioned fuel efficiency there at the very end, I'll just mention that if everything burnt for 8 times longer than we intended it to, global warming would be 8 times worse than it is today. And so if the miracle of Hanukkah is that we can accelerate carbon emissions and destroy life on this planet, by all means, vote with the latke. Already? Yes, sir. Yeah.
Wouldn't that make England even better for making port?
Probably. But it would probably also make Portugal worse at it because it'd be too hot. I don't know much about wine or comparative advantage or any of this fancy economist talk coming over from side latke, which for a humble food seems a little highfalutin today. So I suppose it's in reference to the latke that the honorably mistaken opposition has employed such circular logic against me today. Like the Hamantash, however, I will get right to the point. And like the Hamantash, I have 3 of them. Before I go into them, however, I would like to explain what I'm not here to do. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't dislike latkes. In fact, I will make such a bold concession that potatoes fried in oil are delicious. Shocking, I know. Potatoes fried in oil are delicious. This fact is well established. It is the basis of the highly successful business model of every major fast food corporation, and I will not commit any act of sophistry by denying it here today. As such, I'm not here to belittle the latke. I'm not here to refer to it condescendingly as a tater cake or a spud patty. I will not emphasize that the only difference between a latke and a Klein hash brown is an onion and an imagined history. I will even take the high road and not belabor the point that the latke is, in essence, nothing more than a greasy, fat-fried, smushed down, heartburn-causing, artery-clogging, labor-intensive, knuckle-scraping, oil-addicted, condiment requiring, health eroding, kitchen fire starting, potato industrial complex promoting, lowest common denominator pandering, French fry imitating, ahistorical, easily burnical, miracle mocking little round disc. I'm not here to say that. I might say that, but I'm not here to say that. Rather, I think the latke is a very excellent food of its kind. And furthermore, I think that all ethnically Jewish foods should stick together. As Pastor Martin Niemöller famously said after the Second World War, first they came for the challah, but I said nothing because I was gluten intolerant. I will even go so far as to say that the latke is one of the very best Jewish foods. So you guys beat out matzah, the bread of affliction, and bitter herbs, and gefilte fish, so good job with that one. That's pretty good. It's just that compared to the a priori beauty and tastiness of the Hamantash, the latke simply cannot stack up. Yes, that's a pancake joke. I will prove this on 3 fronts. The first is philosophy. The second is modern American politics. And the third is through history, throwing back the curtain on the shadowy conspiracy behind the latke's dramatic rise in popular culture, a point that my partner will help me with from Budapest. And I will show my summary that the meaning of Hanukkah itself, in fact, favors the Hamantash. Very surprising, I know. But first, the argument from philosophy. It's impossible to know what stance Plato would have taken on the issue before us today. If it were possible, it would be even harder to tell if Plato was being ironic or not. But the fact that Plato was too ironic for Bard students to decipher is proof enough of his relevance to this debate. However, just because he does not take a definitive stance on which food is positively the best, and because we don't know how many layers of sarcasm are being employed when the guests at the symposium respond, yes, Socrates, the latke is most assuredly tasty, doesn't mean we can't learn anything from him on the issue. Consider the Platonic ideal of pure taste. Like all Platonic ideals, it's impossible to say with any amount of articulation exactly what this is, exactly what the pinnacle of tastiness is, the thing that embodies taste itself and of which there can be no tastier thing. We do know, however, that the latke is not it. Think about it for a moment, okay? Imagine in your mind a perfectly delicious item. I'll give you a second. An item so perfectly delicious that this thing cannot be made tastier in any way. Adding anything to it will make it less tasty. Taking anything away from it will make it less tasty, okay? So take this thing that's the pinnacle of tastiness from your mind and put it on the table in front of you. Don't eat it yet. Before you eat it, I want you to take a giant jar of applesauce and dump it on this perfect thing. And then take a big tub of sour cream and slop down an old spoonful right on top of the Platonic ideal of taste. And let me ask you a question. Did your item just get any tastier, or did it get less tasty? The latke here is in a double bind. If you claim that the condiments made it tastier, then the latke itself could not have been the Platonic ideal of pure taste. And the fact that a latke is at least partially defined as a thing that goes very well with applesauce and sour cream, we know that the latke is by definition not the Platonic ideal of pure taste. Now, if you say the condiments didn't make the latke any tastier, then we've all been living a lie, been told for years that applesauce and sour cream make the latkes better. We have to go back and reconsider all of our notions of what is a latke, at which point the debate has to start over. And I'll be here whenever you guys reconsider that. But until then, we know that the latke is not the Platonic ideal of pure taste. We don't know this about the Hamantash. It could very well be Plato's most tastiest thing ever. Picture a Hamantashen in your head. If you want it to be a prune Hamantashen, that's fine. If you want it to be a poppy Hamantashen, that's fine. Just get it in your head. Now, what can you do to make this Hamantashen tastier? Nothing. If you prefer a different type of Hamantashen, you can have that one, but it's still just a Hamantashen. There's nothing you could do to make it a better Hamantashen than what it is. Do you know of a better Hamantashen?
Isn't the Platonic idea singular, in which case a simple class of pastries that have a variety of different fillings could not be the whole of the Platonic ideal?
Well, the whole point is that what I imagine as the tastiest possible thing in the world might be different than what you imagine the most possible tastiest thing in the world is. The point is that it's relative to the individual, and here I'm talking that no individual can make his individual most perfect Hamantashen any better in any way, and therefore it is the philosophically perfect food. Now, there's some modern reasons to support the Hamantashen as well. Politically speaking, the Hamantashen is not only the superior Jewish food, it is also the superior American food. Beyond the latke's role as a fatty, fried problem in America's growing obesity epidemic, and its promotion of our dependence on oil, our oil addiction, the Hamantashen embodies what it means to be an American. Don't believe me? Let's take a closer look at America the Beautiful, what would be our national anthem if the Star-Spangled Banner didn't bear a much closer resemblance to a Michael Bay production. Oh, beautiful for spacious skies, for amber waves of grain, for purple mountains' majesty above the fruited plain. Let's just take the first verse. Oh, beautiful for spacious skies, read an open top. For amber, read apricot, waves of grain, flower. For purple, read prunes, mountains, read triangles, majesty, above the fruited, read fruited, plain. Plain could be baking sheet, but I think I might be going a bit far, but I think I have sufficient critical interpretation at this point. So we see that when somebody thinks America is beautiful, it's because they think America looks like a Hamantash. But there's more. There's more. America is the great melting pot. It's a place where prune lovers and poppy lovers can live together in harmony. A place where apricot lovers and fig lovers can eat at the same table. And what's more, they can celebrate their individuality while remembering that we are all binded together by the same dough. That's the America I believe in. That's a Hamantashen America. Hamantashen celebrate diversity. They celebrate that while we all come from different backgrounds and eat different fillings, that we all love cookies. And while I may not agree with your choice of filling, I will fight to the death for your right to eat it. Latkes can claim to be diverse. Sour cream or applesauce, they say. That's two things. But slathering on an external semblance of multiculturalism only distracts from the core of the latke, which is potato, always potato, must be potato, reminding us that there's only one right type of American, only one way to be an American. We need a new type of politics in America. We need Hamantashen. And so that is why, at the end of this debate today, and for the reasons my partner is going to Skype in, I implore you to vote for the Hamantash.
Good evening. Now, I've heard a lot from Side Hamantash about philosophy and America and which tastes better and which is the pinnacle of taste. But really, I'm going to show you why all of that's irrelevant and why latkes have the potential and actually are already saving the world and why Hamantashen are killing people. So, first, why latkes are saving the world. Now, what are latkes made of? We've heard of this already. poverty and end world hunger. Now, as the Food and Agricultural Organization, a subsidiary of the UN, affirmed the need to revive public awareness of the relationship that exists between poverty, food security, malnutrition, and the potential contribution of the potato to defeating hunger. Why is this? There are a few main reasons. The first, the potato is cheap and plentiful, and it's the world's #1 non-grain food commodity. So it's easy to access and inexpensive for poor individuals to eat. Can grow almost everywhere, unlike the flour in the Hamantashen, from the Americas to the Asia and Africa. Also, it's perishable, which doesn't sound good, but actually is, because this means that it's difficult to trade across national borders, which means that it's a very stable food crop because it doesn't rely on world trade, and just can be grown inside every country, and remain stable even during the world food crisis. It's also on the rise in developed countries and is highly nutritious, with one potato providing half of a person's needed vitamin C that you would.
Yes. With the Hamantash different fillings, you have a very wide diversity of foodstuffs. Whereas if you get a country to rely solely on the potato of the latke and have that be their main sustenance, I don't know. I think I may have heard something about some sort of potato famine this one time that was very bad as a result.
I see where you're going. But the wonderful thing about the potato is that there are a multitude of different species, and if you plant those, you don't have to worry about those problems. And actually, I will later in my speech get to why the most popular filling of your lovely Hamantashen poppy seeds are killing people. Now, moving on with potatoes and how they're saving the world. Now we're looking at a crisis. We're looking at a world with 9 billion people in it in the near future, and there's not enough food to feed them currently. But with the potato, which we see as the main ingredient in latke, we have the potential to feed those people because it's cheap, because it's plentiful, because it can grow everywhere, because it's nutritious. We see this as a way we can solve the world's food crisis. We can solve the world's poverty crisis. We see the potato as the food of the future, the food that will save the world. And we see latke as intrinsically attached to the potato, as supporting the potato, because every time you eat latke, you support the potato, because you bought potatoes to make that latke, and you're supporting the end of world hunger. Now, what are you supporting when you eat a hamantash? What fills a hamantashen? Well, as we've already seen, yes?
Yes, Madam Speaker. Now, it might be supporting the potato industry, but won't this just be increasing obesity in America when we already have an obesity crisis?
Well, I see dying, starving people as a bigger crisis than obesity. So something might perhaps touch on obesity, which we actually think that a sugary, doughy treat affects obesity as well. But if the potatoes going into a fried latke also have an effect on obesity, we see that as a small problem compared to the fact that they will end world hunger. But now, moving on to the lovely hamantashen. What is it filled with? Poppy seeds. And where do poppy seeds come from? The opium poppy. And what else comes from the opium poppy? Opium. And what can you get from opium? Heroin. So we see that while latkes equate with the end of world hunger, hamantashen equate with heroin. But you would disagree.
Doesn't that just mean every hamantashen filled with poppies is one less heroin injection because the poppies go to delicious treats?
That's a misunderstanding, because the seeds are not where the heroin comes from. But in order to get those seeds, you have to grow the whole plant, including the part where you can get heroin from. So actually, that's false. And what does heroin do? Heroin kills people. And not just heroin, but also prescription opiates, which also come from, not surprising, the opium poppy. Now, we see that in America, we have a problem with heroin and prescription opiates. We see that every year, hundreds of thousands of people rush into emergency rooms after overdosing with these dangerous drugs. And we also see thousands and thousands of deaths. So, as I've shown you here today, if you support the latke, you support the end of world hunger. You support life. You support the end of poverty. And if you support the hamantashen, you support drugs, heroin, and death. Thank you.
Well, thank you all for being here today. This is an exciting event. I guess it's Bard's first transatlantic debate, so I'm happy to be a part of that. And Radley really touched on a lot of the main parts about why Hamantashen are so good. So I'm going to keep this short and sweet, my speech short and sweet, just like Hamantashen are. Now, I want to talk about a few things today. So the first is how Hamantashen are made, and thus why they are superior to the Latke. The second point, and Radley touched on this a bit, I want to elaborate on it a little bit more, is how Hamantashen actually promotes diversity, and how this is an especially important asset to America in the 21st century. And the third is that this represents, the Hamantashen represents the mind-body dynamic, and I'll talk about why that's important. And then lastly, how latkes are just a fried food to get everyone to like Hanukkah because big business wants to commercialize it. And I'll get into that a little bit later on. And we think that's a bad thing. We want Hanukkah to be celebrated for its own virtues and not to be commercialized like all these other products in America. So getting back into the first point. Now let's consider how Hamantashen are actually made, right? Now I'm not sure how many of you have actually tried it, but it's a genuinely good treat. You have, it can be either apricots or prunes or dates. These are healthy things. We believe on our side they're very tasty, and certainly that diversity in taste is better than a standard one-size-fits-all latke. But let's consider how actually Hamantashen are made. So, like latkes, they are best made in social groups, but in a much more meaningful way. So first, the dough is carefully made from diverse elements, differing fruits, and they're kneaded into a common theme. And so this is a soothing and sensuous activity which exudes feelings of eroticism and love, which, by the way, are essential features in the propagation of humankind. So we think that Hamantashen promotes these virtues, promotes these emotions, and we think that we want to be fostering these types of things. While making latke, you know, you just take potatoes, you throw it in a frying pan, you throw oil in there. It doesn't exude any of those feelings. And we think that if we want the world to be a more loving place, making Hamantashen is a start. And then, you know, each Hamantashen, I've made it before. It's personally formed and it's folded by hand like pottery. It's not just slopped together like latkes are made. And so just like arts and crafts are good for the soul, so is the making of Hamantashen. You know, you really have to put energy into that. And it's a much more, you know, fulfilling type of activity than making latkes, just generally speaking. So now going on to the second point about, you know, how Hamantashen actually promotes diversity. They're multicolored. You know, we have, you know, white Hamantashen, brown, black, yellow, red, just like America, okay? And we want to promote the virtues of diversity like America by promoting Hamantashen. And we think that there's truly a Hamantashen representing every single American. Now, like Bradley touched on, I don't know what kind of America side latke wants, but I can assure you we don't want a one-size-fits-all America, okay? And Hamantashen represents a multicultural America, and that's what we want to be representing here in the 21st century in the United States. And, you know, speaking of diversity, Hamantashen brings together very diverse food elements. You have, you know, your flour, your butter, your sugar. They're baked, not fried, which is healthier. And you have all those different fruits that I mentioned before, and we think that's a good thing. And then also just touching on how Hamantashen represents the whole mind-body dynamic. So we think that a healthy fruit filling benefits the body, while the cookie shell is very tasty and emotionally pleasing to the mind. And better yet, Hamantashen sets a fine example for the constructive channeling of anger and bad feeling, sublimating the desire for revenge. Because let's all remember here, the reason that Hamantashen was created to begin with was to get all those negative feelings out towards Haman. And what better way of getting vengeance than by making pastries and eating it? Right?
Other point.
Yes.
Are you aware of the fact that they made these pastries after lashing out with their anger and killing mass amounts of Persians?
You know, I am aware of that. But what I'm trying to say here today, ma'am, is that we can perpetuate that vengeance through tasty pastries that are then consumed by people, and we think that's a good way to get our anger out. And I'm Jewish. I was raised eating Hamantash in my childhood, and I can assure you, it's a good way for Jews to get their anger out by eating pastries. It's a good thing. I have personal experience with this. Now, now the last point I want to touch on is how latkes are really just a fried food to get everyone to like Hanukkah because big business wants to commercialize it, right? So we talked, the other side talked a lot about, how popular potatoes are, especially fried potatoes, and I absolutely agree. If you go to any fast food restaurant, the number one product are French fries, across the board. It's the most common product within fast food chains. And we think that by promoting latkes, you're just stigmatizing the holiday known as Hanukkah, and you're trying to commercialize it. And we want to celebrate Hanukkah for its own virtues, for its own story. And we think with the Hamantashen, because it is such a unique pastry, if I might say, and a tasty one at that we can better promote Judaism and better promote a more individualistic holiday known as Purim. And we think Hanukkah is being stigmatized by the Latke. We think that's a bad thing for Jews everywhere. Yes, yes.
If Hamantashen were any good, wouldn't they also risk commercializing Purim?
If Hamantashen were any good, would they risk commercializing Purim? I suppose that there might be a risk somewhere down the line, but in the status quo, which is what we're talking about right now, in the status quo, Hamantashen provides a unique pastry and an outlet to Gentiles everywhere to experience an individualized Jewish holiday, unlike the Latke. We think Latke is promoting Hanukkah in bad ways that sort of morphs what Hanukkah is actually about. So we think that's a bad thing. And if that problem arises in the future, we'll deal with it then. And then, Madam Speaker, I just want to touch on a few points that the side Latke has made. I just want to rebut a few of them, if I may. So, Ian came up to the podium, and he used a lot of economic terms he's throwing out there, comparative advantage, okay? We're talking about wool and port. Those were great things, but how are they actually related to latkes and Hamantashen, right? So, we think, and he made an example. He said that donuts and all these other fried pastries are already popular. We can already enjoy them. So to hell with the Hamantashen. That's the gist of his speech, I think. Now, we think that if more people were exposed to the Hamantashen, that would be it would be more appreciated, like the donut, like other pastries. So it just needs the ability to thrive in the marketplace, so that people can enjoy it more. And I might say that, and this is another point I really didn't touch on that much, but how Hamantashen are just so much more healthier than the Latke. Latke is fried food. The Hamantashen incorporates very, very healthy fruits like apricots, like prunes, like figs. We think that's a good thing. And we think that popularizing a much healthier alternative is good for the United States. And like I mentioned before in one of my POIs, the US is facing an obesity crisis. Now is the worst time to be promoting latkes. We have to be promoting Hamantashen. And then just the last point I want to touch on is where the previous speaker, she came up and she talked about how Hamantashen is killing people and how we are promoting poppies, and thus we are promoting heroin, and thus we are promoting the deaths of millions of people. This is ludicrous, ladies and gentlemen, okay? Now, if you wanna blame problems on the poppy, go right ahead. But let me just remind you that there are plenty of other things the poppy seed is used for that people eat on a daily basis. And another one would be the bagel. And poppy seeds are plentiful on bagels, and we all enjoy bagels. And even the last speaker, I'm sure she has eaten poppy seed bagels. Okay, so poppy seeds aren't the problem. There are other ways to approach the problems with poppies over in Afghanistan, for instance, in the Middle East. But you know, she's making a false dilemma here, where it's blaming it on the Hamantash, where there's other things that we can deal with to fix the problem. So it's really not Hamantash's fault. And just to wrap up, Hamantashen, it's delicious, it's healthy, it promotes Judaism in a better way than latkes do. And it promotes diversity like America. So if you support all of these things, you should vote side Hamantashen. Thank you very much.
Oh, do people want food? We could take a 5-minute break right now and everyone can go get food except this guy. No?
No, let's go.
Just, alright. Yeah. I'll go through some stuff.
Sorry. During the summary speeches, the next two speeches, anybody in the audience can raise their hand like we've been doing and ask a question.
Yeah, that's definitely encouraged. So we think right now the debate has come down to like two major questions. One, do we make sensible choices given limited stomach space? And two, do we support addiction and death or nutrition and sustenance? So we think that we need to make sensible choices about our limited stomach spaces, and we think that while they're both delicious, when you're looking at all the different food options, latke stands out above everything else in its food, anything else that it could be compared with. It stands shining above, a humble yet proud treat. Whereas Hamantashen are kind of lost, not really noticed. And we think that comes out in the last speech, where we were told that latkes risk promoting Judaism in a bad way. Well, we didn't hear how is it bad. We just heard that it threatens to commercialize it. But we hear no analysis as to what way it would commercialize it. We think everything that they say about that really just supports just shows the popularity and the strength and the appreciation which America shows the latke. And if Hamantashen were any good, as I was mentioning in my POI, it too would risk popularizing and commercializing Jewish culture. And yet in response they say, well, if that happens, we'll deal with it then. Well, that happening would mean Hamantashen getting better. Because if they were better, then they would be in the same boat that latkes are in. So we think we should spend our limited time on latkes. We also think that this idea that there are philosophical and literary arguments about songs. America the Beautiful is not our national anthem. No, bombs bursting in sky. And that's oil bursting in the pan. We think that when they claim that latkes aren't platonically ideal because it has condiments that go along well with it, we think they fail to see the point that latkes are in a symbiotic relationship with dairy and fruit, with apple and sour cream. And so when they get up here and start talking about the health of fruit products in pastries, they neglect that those fruit products are dried and therefore have broken down the complex sugars that are so healthy into small, less complex, simple sugars that are not healthy for you. And they fail to see that applesauce is a fresh fruit sitting on top of a delicious and nutritious potato vehicle. So we have potatoes that are cheap and good at providing sustenance for the whole world, and applesauce, which is good and employs people in this region that we're in right now. So that's why. We think it comes down to that. We think it comes down to a nutritional, delicious, popular food that goes great with 2 amazing condiments versus a sugary pastry that gives you a false sense of choice when you choose between meaningless choices of dried fruit and perhaps a filling that kills people. So given that, we think if you like people, if you like feeding people, if you like potatoes, if you like oil, if you like the Star-Spangled Banner and bombs bursting in sky, mainly, if you like sour cream, you should vote for side Hanukkah and side Latke.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, the economic arguments. I believe I already adequately addressed them by saying the word economics in a funny voice. But if I haven't, I'll do it again. Economics. Those arguments dismissed, we can move on to the poppy seed heroin problem. Now, this being barred, I counterplan Lee's analysis with legalizing drugs. That way they can be regulated, taxed, and controlled, and we can treat the heroin crisis as a public health epidemic instead of the moral crusade coming from side Latke, where there's a problem, we deal with it in a rational way, not by banning it and anything vaguely connected to it in cookie form. Now, I'm going to conclude for side Hamantashen by turning the spirit and argument of Hanukkah itself and show you why the Maccabees would have eaten Hamantash. Now, first of all, like I said before, I want to stress the latkes are very delicious food, okay? And they're even a miraculous food. Last time I was making latkes, the pan caught fire and it burned for 8 days and 8 nights, and I couldn't put it out, and it was very scary and unbelievable, and that was great. My grandfather's joke is that if you eat a latke, your heart burns for 8 days and 8 nights, and that's also very miraculous. Not many foods can achieve that. I think Ted Cohen, in his Latke-Hamantash speech at the original University of Chicago debate, said that it's no coincidence that the English equivalents of the letters on the dreidel spell out Tums, because that is what you need when you're dealing with Hanukkah latkes. So, where does the latke come from? They didn't have potatoes in the time of the Maccabees. These are a New World vegetable. They weren't frying potatoes in oil the year after the Maccabees beat off the Greeks to celebrate. They were frying, something else, something they had there. I'm not a food anthropologist, whatever that field is, I'm sure it is one. So we see that latkes are only connected to Hanukkah insofar as they're fried in oil, which is to say the latkes are as religiously and culturally significant as French fries, as donuts, which are another thing, anything fried in oil, the sea turtles that got caught in BP's oil burn-off. I'm not saying latkes are like fried sea turtles, I'm just implying it heavily. So latkes really had nothing to do with the original meaning of Hanukkah. And you say, well, maybe they used something very similar, maybe they used sweet potatoes or yams, but you can't make latkes out of yams. I tried this with I tried it with Professor Achebe a few years ago, and Professor Achebe, he made the latke with the sweet potato. We didn't stay together. He said, "These things fall apart." So that's no good. You can't do that. The latke is totally not connected from the spirit of Hanukkah. We see it is an attempt to merge Hanukkah into a larger European and American culture by providing a bridge, fried potato. That's something we can all get behind. And I should mention, in the spirit of the diversity of the Hamantashen, if you want to put applesauce and sour cream in a Hamantashen, go for it. If you want to put a latke in Hamantashen, that's a latke I can get behind. However, so we see it's an attempt to bring these cultures together to Americanize and Europeanize Judaism. Now, you can argue about whether or not that's a good thing, but what we have to remember about Hanukkah is it wasn't simply a Jewish rebellion against the Greeks. It was also a civil war between sects of Jews, one of whom, the non-Maccabee sect, wanted to further Hellenize, assimilate to the Greeks. So, with the Maccabees, yes.
So, are you aware that one of the main ingredients in the Hamantashen is sugar, and that sugar also originated in the New World and has little to do with the history of the Jews?
Yes, so little to do that original Hamantashen recipes inscribed in stone tablets, recently discovered and you can't refute because you don't have any stone tablets on you, were made with honey, which was widely available in Jerusalem at the time. Jerusalem, land of milk and honey, so they could have gotten dairy, honey. They're all set to make Hamantashen. So that point falls because I fiat it. So would the Maccabees embrace a symbol of what essentially it would be modern Hellenization? No, they would choose something much more unique, something that isn't designed to placate other cultures, something that isn't designed to make Judaism more appealing because Hanukkah is near Christmas and big business needed a hook in order to be able to sell progressively more Christmas-like presents during Hanukkah. And so we think, for all these reasons, the Maccabees themselves, given the choice, would have eaten a Hamantash. And also I should point out that the eternal flame in the temple that was kept going by the miracle of Hanukkah caused the temple to have a terrible carbon footprint. And we have to consider strongly whether or not that's the reason it was destroyed in the first place. So, we've heard a lot from Side Latke about how delicious they are, about economics, and about how poppies are destroying the world. But we think all of this pales in comparison to the fact that both from the philosophical perspective, from the Jewish culinary perspective, and from the American political perspective, the Hamantash is the sensible food, the delicious food, the right food, the best food.
I must say I am almost speechless. This is an institution that values tradition. We have fireworks at Blythewood the evening following commencement. We have baccalaureate. We have FISEM. We even have a new tradition like citizen science. Years from now, when your grandchildren are enjoying themselves through citizen science, they will tell stories of the very first Bard Latke-Hamantash debate that took place a week before spring break in 2011, and they will wish that they had been here. We have heard about pork and wool and heroin. We have heard about bombs bursting in air and about the spacious skies and their amber waves of grain. We have heard deep philosophical arguments and silly ones as well. Now the time has come to resolve the question. If you are right-handed, I would ask that you place your left hand firmly over your eyes. If you are left-handed, I would ask that you place your right hand firmly over your eyes. Now using your dominant, if you are ambidextrous, close your eyes and don't peek. I would now like to ask you if you would like to vote for the side Latke. Raise your dominant hand. Keep them up. One more minute. Please put your hands down. If you would now like to vote for side Hamantash, raise your dominant hand. Raise them higher, please. Okay, put your hands down. Uncover your eyes. I'm not a historian of the Latke-Hamantash debate, so I can't speak authoritatively and definitively on this. But I believe that never before in the history of the academic art form, and it is an art form, has there been a tie between the two sides. But tonight, in keeping with the Bard tradition of innovation, we've had an absolute tie. The only way to break this tie will be for us to reconvene at roughly this time next year. You're a senior, right? Yeah, well, we can fix that. We can get you another year. What senior project? We never found a senior. I, first of all, want to thank Side Latke, Side Hamantash, both locally and internationally, and thank all of you for coming. This is a first, but by no means a last, foray of Bardians into the treacherous waters of Hamantash Latke. Thank you very much. There is a Purim party. It's all actually pre-Purim, because Purim is during spring break. In, I think, about 40 minutes in Klein. You're all invited to go there. Happy Purim now. Happy Hanukkah next December. And have a lovely evening. Thank you very much.